Okay. Very good morning, everyone. We are from Group 1, and today our group will present about how the nature monopoly works. Before we started, we would like to introduce ourselves.
My name is Adrea.
My name is Alesha.
My name is Ashley.
My name is Chandra.
My name is Manda.
And my name is Fildzah.
Okay, so here's the agenda of our presentation. So by the end of our explanation, we will be able to understand three main points of the materials. The first one is the definition and characteristics. So in the definition, we will explain about defining the meaning of the natural monopoly, the characteristic and the difference between natural monopoly and monopoly. And then we will elaborate the examples of natural monopoly as well as the regulations. And then potential negative externalities that could happen due to natural monopoly and ways and solutions to mitigate them.
Okay, in order to develop principles and make prediction about markets and how producers will behave in them, economists have developed four principles model of market structure: perfect competition, monopoly, oligopoly, and monopolistic competition. We're going to talk about monopoly. Now, there are a lot of assumptions about monopoly, such as monopoly only be beneficial for the company. It is viewed as terrible, illegal, and exploit helpless consumer, which is wrongly assumed because natural monopoly tends to achieve social welfare. Well, what is natural monopoly? Next. Okay. Now let's define natural monopoly. It can be stated that the natural monopoly is a practice when a company or firm only has one product or service but is needed or used by many people without competitors. The goal is to attain social welfare. While natural monopoly exists when the firm gets bigger as the average cost constantly decreases. Speaking monopoly generally, on the other hand, firms in perfectly competitive market earns normal profit, defined as return sufficient to pay all inputs, at least their returns in alternative employment, for example, their opportunity cost. While monopoly is juxtaposed against this idealized setup. For monopolies, output decision directly change total supply and hence the market price. By limiting output, monopolies increase the market price above marginal cost and earn monopoly profits, or rents, defined as return to inputs in excess of the amount necessary to keep them in operation. Perfect competition maximizes both consumers and producers' surpluses, while monopoly generates dead weight losses. So are monopolies good or bad, or both? We will discuss this later. Next. Now, natural monopoly occurs in two ways. First is when a company takes advantage of the tight barriers to doing business in the sector, because the tighter the barriers to doing business, the competitors of the company must have a large capital to beat the existing monopoly company. The second way, namely by producing goods and service on a large scale, so that the cost of production can be more efficient than the opposing company. Low production costs will certainly make the selling price cheaper, so that many people buy up their products.
In natural monopoly, there are several characteristics. One of the most significant characteristics of a natural monopoly is that it occurs naturally, which means there are no external factors such as government restrictions or safeguards that impede competition. Natural monopolies emerge as a result of economic dynamics that prevent more than one business from joining a market. These natural components are primarily centered on two factors, which are high fixed costs and lengthy economies of scale. Secondly, a natural monopoly has large fixed costs. For instance, sewage systems have significant initial fixed costs, but also require regular maintenance. If you say that those initial fixed costs were $10 billion, it means that it needs to make that much money back in order to make it economically viable. If two firms participate, the initial fixed expenses to build two sewage networks will be $20 billion. That implies the two companies must now recuperate twice their investment in order to be commercially viable. Furthermore, natural monopolies have large fixed costs with little or no marginal costs. That implies serving one more client costs very little, suggesting that economies of scale are critical for such businesses. Lastly, in natural monopoly, competition is undesirable. The point at which a business benefits from economies of scale in a natural monopoly is close to the total market demand. That is, economic production is inefficiently prior to this time because the average cost of creating goods and services is higher than it would be otherwise. That way, it would be more economically efficient and desirable to have one provider.
Okay, as we stated before, natural monopoly requires large fixed costs. For example, rail track or other infrastructure, starting from the materials, installation fees, signals, and many more, which we will explain later about the examples, need huge costs. Sorry. Despite having a large fixed cost, it could be beneficial because the total cost will also be very large. And as we can see on the formula here, to minimize the average cost, or AC, it's going to take a huge quantity. That means it has a great economy of scale potential where there is not a monopolies. If we see under the diagram here, the long run average cost curve for a natural monopolies is going to be downward sloping for a huge quantity range. That is because to minimize the average will take a really high quantity. Therefore, the minimum where all economy of scale of a fully exploited will occur in a very high quantity level.
So, as we have previously known, both monopoly and natural monopoly are characterized by dominating the market. But what exactly are the differences between these two? First, monopoly market is deliberately formed by a group of companies to control the market through aggressive corporate action, such as by forming a cartel or trust, while natural monopoly is a monopoly that occurs naturally because of a pure market mechanism, usually because the company has something unique and not owned by its competitors. For example, like efficient production costs or the use of certain technologies. Secondly, based on the goals itself, monopoly intends to obtain most benefits, while natural monopoly aims to provide the needs of people. And last but not least, the objects of monopoly market are usually consumer goods, while the objects of natural monopoly are public utilities.
Okay, so the examples of natural monopoly. Next. The first example is railways, road, and highways infrastructure industry. So why are these infrastructure industries considered as a natural monopoly? Because of the need to build a large infrastructure, this causes a new firm to not be able to enter because only a limited number of influential people can access a huge capital. If the new firm insists on entering the industry, not only reduces the opportunity for both firms making them unprofitable, but also there will be unavoidable effects on the economies. Short example, we know that Indonesia is a large population country, so it's costly. Let's say that Indonesia wants to make a new subway system, such as MRT, which has a high start of fixed cost, meaning projects like this need to be undertaken by the government. This also makes deterring entry of new firms because they don't want to take any risk. Because this serving for the entire market, it can achieve a lower average cost, which is also beneficial to society, and it also can serve lower price since it's not competitive. Next. The second one is the electric industry. So there are three functions of the electric industry that operated as a natural monopoly. The first one is power generation, because it was less expensive for one firm to operate a few large power plant than if many firms operate smaller power plants, this leads to natural monopoly. And the second function is wire businesses. Having one set of wires is less expensive than having two or more. That eventually will lead customer to buy wires in one firm only, making the other firms unprofitable. And the last function is retail sales function. There's small chance for firms to compete because power generation and wires businesses are basically natural monopoly. So a retail sales function is related with those two functions, and these three functions operate together and integrated natural monopoly. Next. The third example is mining industry. So in Indonesia, for example, Papua and Tulungagung. In Papua, we know they hold the largest gold mine, and in Tulungagung, they produce unique marble that cannot be imitated by others. And there are many more examples. Next. The last example is KAI PLN. So companies produced by natural monopolies in Indonesia, such as KAI and PLN. Both companies are included as natural monopoly companies controlled by the government because they acted as the producer, distributor, and provider at once, and their product or service support the lives of the people in Indonesia. PLN provides the resources needed to operate and maintain their products or services. The former operates power generators and control electricity flows across the country, while KAI imports the trains, operating and building railways, and provides energy needed to operate the trains.
The regulation of monopolies are created in order to prevent unreasonable practices that take advantage of the customer. In terms of this, monopoly is regulated on Article 50 and Article 51 of the Indonesian government regulations, which discuss about protecting the public interest and improving the efficiency of the national economy as one of the efforts to improve people's welfare. While natural monopoly is regulated on Article 52, which specifically states that goods or services that affect the lives of many people and goods or services that are important branches of production for the country will be carried out by BUMN, entity or institution established or appointed by the government.
So now we're going to discuss about the negative externalities and how to mitigate it. Next. So as natural as it sounds, this market structure can provoke negative externalities to arise. So one of the common negative externalities that it has caused is the creation of a black market. So one of the drawbacks of natural monopolies is that it triggers the creation of a black market or illegal transactions of most goods that could also be stolen. So the black market affords consumers accommodation for the same goods at very low prices. This is because the goods offered in the monopoly market are considered too even, especially for the lower middle class people. In addition, goods tend to be difficult to obtain. So for this, two solutions can be made. The first solution could go where the firm itself must make sure that there won't be a surplus of their unit. In other words, the firm must make sure that no extra goods are being produced. The firm also has to keep track of where their product goes by putting a serial code, which is possible second solution to the first solution. And since the serial code is for one particular item, it provides a tracking process and gives the firm owner access to stock control. The second negative externality is exploitation, and it happens. So natural monopoly markets are at risk of exploitation by both companies and sellers. This can happen because the company or seller sets a price that is relatively high compared to its marginal price. Thus, potential consumers have to pay for the product or service at a much higher price, and this condition causes workers to get lower wages and not to commensurate with the high workload. So the solution is, in simple words, is to set a fair pricing system that fulfills the need of the consumer. So this could be explained through an airline system case. When a customer ordered tickets to go to another country through an aircraft, it would make sense that the transaction would be done weeks or even months before the flight due to preparation reasons, and in this case, a lower price. But in some cases, some customers that need to go due to urgent matters would have to book a flight with a worst case of a day or an hour before the flight, making the prices more expensive. So this analogy could be put to other scenarios where in a way it would exploit the workers with so much sudden workload with the same pay. And generally, the idea of the system, again, is to set a fair pricing system that would fulfill the needs of the consumer, where when a person orders a ticket from a long period of time, it would be reasonable to get a lower price and vice versa because they have the time to prepare. Now, lastly, it's about wastage. So waste is often done by companies that monopolize the market. And usually companies tend to not pay attention to efficiency in production activities. And they just focus on large scale production and how the product should sell. And this costs tend to swell in the production process. So in this case, consumers who rely on a product or services marketed in a monopoly trade cannot ask for more, and consumers must accept the decision of the company. So if prices begin to rise, consumers must continue to buy at high prices. Although most companies are sponsored by the government, it is possible that something like this can happen. So, for example, we are given a scenario where a fuel oil company, when raw materials are scarce and difficult to obtain, the selling price is doubled. Meanwhile, almost everyone needs fuel for their activities. So one solution for this would be to bring in government intervention. And in this scenario, it is to protect interest of consumers. Natural monopolies have the market power to set the prices higher than in competitive markets. And the government can regulate monopolies through price capping, which is to limit the price increase. And in this case, the government can set a price on the oil so that wouldn't have to be too high or too low. So another solution would depend on how desperate a consumer is. So it would go to extents to do their own research and open up their own firm. And this would mean that the newer fuel oil company would give greater benefits to their consumers, leaving the old firm. So in this case, the old firm solution would be to improve from complaints of the consumers and make viable changes so it won't regress. Next slide. Okay, so now we're moving on to the conclusion. So a natural monopoly is a market situation where it is most efficient for one business to make the product. And it's beneficial. So natural monopolies improve the economy by creating systems or products that are native to the area, and they make it more efficient to deliver necessary goods and services to consumers. So the reason why it's beneficial, we're given two reasons. So the first reason is it actually helps to avoid the wastage as there cannot be duplications of products or services. So natural monopolies beneficially exist because realistically, if there were more additional firms entering the market, then their presence would result in a wasteful duplication of resources and higher prices for the consumer. This means that competition actually reduces the welfare of consumers and that the market is more efficient with the existence of only one firm. And the last reason is as a greater chance to deter competition or to completely get rid of competition. So related to the explanation above, when there is a higher profit margin, it helps the organization to invest in better products and the latest technology, which in this case, it avoids any competition from rival firms. And if the profit margin is high, that usually means that the company is on the right track and the company won't have to make viable changes. And then when a company has no competitors, consumers have no choice but to buy from the monopoly. And depending on the scenario, it could be either beneficial or not, but most likely it's good for the firm. So next slide. Thank you for listening to our presentation on natural monopoly. And these are our references.